to all of you to share your remarks and share your stories of resilience from the solutions you all have designed with your teams. As a bottom-up approach is key to resilience building to showcase these projects. We will have our speakers now share their work, starting with the community-level engagement solutions. So I would like to invite to join me Mark Harvey. Please join us in front. Mark Harvey, his team has created a service and partnership that aims to improve weather and climate information services, including early warning of extreme weather for urban users, vulnerable communities at the heart of it. Mark, we know your work. It's amazing. And you work with communities on the ground. Let me turn this on. Let's see. Let me see working. Yeah.
Can you hear me, everybody? Excellent.
Good.
Yes.
So let's watch a video. I think you want to show us something, and so the floor is yours.
Just before we watch the video,
yes,
and we'll do that straight afterwards, I'd like to mention another hidden heroine. Jorge mentioned Nidhi. I would like to mention Anastasia from the Global Resilience Partnership. She is a star.
Aww.
Without her, many of us would simply not be here. And I am incredibly beholden to her, as is the entire team at Resurgence. So, Anastasia, I hope you're watching this.
Thank you, Anastasia.
We love you and we miss you.
Thank you, Nidhi, and thank you, Anastasia. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Okay, perhaps we could roll with a short video that really gives an overview of Daraja.
We needed to put the focus in a format that was more useful for them and that they would appreciate. We finally came up with icons, and so that's what we currently use today.
The Daraja project has helped my community in various ways. Now people are more keen on the weather forecast. They want to know how the weather is going to be so that they can plan their daily activities. So it has helped us a lot.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to spend a moment just sharing with you some of the elements behind our theory of change that really allowed Patricia to work with James and reach that staggering 98% early action rate, and also that real acceleration in access up to 93%. So some elements of the theory of change, but also some principles behind our scaling strategy. So on our theory of change, the first thing we did was to work at systems level in the cities of Nairobi and also Dar es Salaam. At the same time, we worked in Tanzania, in Dar. And what we did was to bring the residents of informal settlements and the community leaders to the table as equal actors with the national weather forecasters, and not just. Other key actors in the urban system, the Red Cross, the City Hall, and the city media. And this is the second piece of our theory of change, they worked on a really deep co-design process on a new city-level forecast. Everybody rolled up their sleeves, and the goal was to produce a product that was accessible, intelligible, and actionable. And what that meant was zoning the forecast, allowing the residents to see their informal settlement on that zoned map of the forecast, co-designing the weather icons, working on language. Traditionally, the forecasts go out in English, moving from that through a local relay network based in one of the settlements into not just Swahili, but the urban patois, Sheng. So we respect the language dynamics of our communities and their diversity. And we want to elevate that because that's the way to move beyond official languages into the uptake of information by communities. Co-design also, we kind of dumped the official channels for early warning dissemination, step back and ask the communities, where do you get your gossip from? Where do you get your sports news from? Where do you hear about your music from? Those are the channels that we want to bring the forecasts and the early warnings to you from. And by the way, we also want you to feed back. So we really did, when we were looking at channels, it was not just about channels to communities, it was to build them back into the National Weather Agency. So those graphics that you saw were about that process. Thirdly, we tried to jettison this whole idea of information dissemination, this whole idea of first mile, last mile, which suggests that information moves in one direction. It doesn't. It actually, information across a city works in a dynamic, what we call an ecosystem, where there are lots of actors that are intermediaries, there are curators, producers, transformers of information. According to the channel, it can be utterly discredited or totally validated and therefore amplified. So we dumped this idea of first mile, last mile, and we created a dynamic system, again, with the residents. So they brought in their community leader, media. They brought in other channels that they trusted. The final piece was to try to connect the spectrum on a continuum between adaptation and resilience and early warning. Some people try to sort of look at early warning information in isolation, in a silo. That's not the way information works. So we're really keen to work just on daily forecasts that may just help the people like James decide whether to put on a t-shirt or a raincoat in the morning, to decide which matatu, which bus he was going to get from where to get across the city. That daily information is incredibly important for productivity, livelihood, and it needs to be respected, and it's part of the picture of early warning systems design, because that, if you can encourage people to get interested in daily weather forecasts, to habituate themselves to those channels, they are then going to take notice of severe weather forecasts. So those four things are behind those impacts that you saw. Looking ahead, that's a bold statement to reach, I think, 1 billion. There are 1 billion people in informal settlements around the world, at least 1 billion, and they are growing because people are being pushed off the land. How are we going to reach that billion, and within 5-6 years, the first 250 million? Well, the first thing we're going to do is to work with the Race to Resilience and its great new metrics framework to design a really strong financial model. We know that there was a 20-to-1 return in cost benefits in avoided damage and loss in the pilots in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. We want to test and retest that model for investment, right? And why do we care about that? Not because we want to make any profit. We're a non-profit social enterprise. We want as much of this money to be spent in country by the communities. But actually, we need to be able to make the case that resilience is a wise investment. And we also need to support this marketplace that needs to evolve in adaptation and resilience investments, and some process of price discovery so that investors, whether they're governments, whether they're foundations, whether they are in country or whether they're global, they have some sense of value for money and what works, and frankly also what doesn't work. It's really important to hold up and look at what doesn't work and where money is being spent badly. And behind this also is our need, through that strong model that Race to Resilience is going to help us build, is the need to move the Daraja service. We always go in with the idea of a service, co-create a product and a service, and there's a partnership and network behind it, but it is a service. But we need to move that from Nairobi and Dar es Salaam to the secondary and tertiary cities. And as we look to other global geographies, again, India, 160 million plus residents of informal settlements in the 12 to 14 metropolitan areas. But what about the secondary and tertiary cities in India? We need that model. Second principle that we're going to maintain is the core axis is between people like Patricia and James. Patricia is an IPCC scientist. She's the chief meteorologist for the Kenya Meteorological Department. She is also in the negotiation team here. She's working deep at the coalface of the negotiations, as is her counterpart in Daraja from Dar es Salaam, Dr. Changa. So they are focal points for the IPCC. We want to maintain that access between Patricia and James throughout this process, moving forward into future COPs, because scientists like Patricia are looking at things like rising heat, and they are feeding that back into the system that we have designed in Nairobi so that it can adjust, it can adapt itself and provide new and useful information. And I think the third and final thing that is essential to our scale up is a partnership base. And that is where we have not just this key foundational partnership with Race to Resilience, but we have evolved partnerships with the Early Action Partnership. They are critical to helping us scale, and to other core strategic partners, Red Cross Climate Center, Cruise, the major early warning investment that came out of Paris, and then finally key networks, city networks such as ICLE, Global Cities Resilience Networks. And lastly, Sheila Patel was mentioned here. She's a high-level champion for the Race to Resilience. She is the co-founder of Slum Dwellers International. That federation of Slum Dwellers International across hundreds of cities that connects community-based organizations working in formal settlements is absolutely key to us. The goal will always be, it's not tech scaling, this is not a technology scale-up. This is a scale-up that hits that sweet spot between impact at scale and catalyzing locally led adaptation through the kind of local leadership that is evidenced by the work of Patricia and James. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Very, very inspiring. Thank you so much. Fantastic project. So now our next speaker is part of the Frontline Fund Accelerator. They are working with partners to address the gap in grassroots-led funding mechanisms. Their vision